music. There, that one's better. So check this out. What I can't do is I can't put in the description if it's a controversial subject or LinkedIn will step on my distribution and engagement. It's so ridiculous. Yeah, I know. So I have to put a description that talks about the broadcasting, and then it seems like everybody's okay. But today, we're going to be doing the IMA weekly webinar, all right? It's going to go off in about 12 minutes. The formerly FLCCC, we're talking about Simone Gold, Pierre Corey, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Peter McCullough. We're talking Emmanuel, the Nigerian doctor who was so passionate, and so these are the who's who of the groundbreakers, the pioneers that stepped up to the table and that had something to say. So this broadcast is called Detransitioners, Medical, Psychological, and Legal Realities. All right, so I can't put that description into LinkedIn or just gonna destroy my analytics. How do we care for patients who once believed changing their gender was the answer, right? Oops, the wrong one. That's it. Right? We'll go like this. This week, all right, only to find themselves in need of medical care, support, and acknowledgement. This week, I am a head of medical and scientific affairs and host Dr. Ryan Cole will be joined by I am a senior fellow in pediatrics, Dr. Catherine Welch, pediatric critical care nurse and founder of the Center of Bioethics and Cultural Network. Jennifer Lay, RN, and detransitioner Forrest Smith. This should be powerful for an important conversation on the often untold medical, psychological, and legal realities of detransitioning. Join us today at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, as the panel examines the gaps in care, recognition, and follow-up. Oops, I lost it. That many detransitioners now face, and considers what a more honest, compassionate, and patient-centered response should look like. Discussions points include why detransitioners are so often overlooked or dismissed, the ongoing medical, psychological, and legal challenges they may face, where meaningful support, better care, and real progress are beginning to emerge. So that's the webinar for today. Will be simulcasting, and I'll be going in and out, trying to work the comment section. You have to, and we'll see where it takes us. So what I'm using is a series of tools, which is a hybrid combination, right? So I'm using StreamYard, so I can do the insane thing of bringing up video like in an instant. Like, here's 20 seconds of absolute ridiculous, shameless self-promotion. 18 seconds. So you can't unsee this.
Unofficial king of Lincoln.
All right, let's try that again. It's live.
Unofficial king of Lincoln. And on the replay ride, yeah. Hit that follow, keep that streak alive.
Oh man, I'm having problems with my hand claps. That is just unacceptable. There we go. Gotta have hand claps. And so I've got OBS hooked up through StreamYard, screen sharing, Zoom. All right, so we've got, here's a tech stack: OBS, StreamYard, Zoom, plus VoiceMeeter. Right? Maybe I can show you my setup later, but we're waiting for it to begin. It should begin any minute. And I'm monitoring. Well, I think it looks we'll try to go to the vault. Do you want to go to the vault? What do you guys? You want to go to the vault? Let's go to the vault. Okay, here is the vault. All right, so this is my setup, right? This right here, right there, that's OBS. Right here is StreamYard. Over here is Zoom, and then over here is a VoiceMeeter. Right, and this takes up a decent amount of CPU, so I like to minimize it. So right now you can see we're up at 89%. Now should be lower. It will be lower once I get out of the vault mode. So I use a web-friendly version to monitor the audio. Mixer is down, and so see we're at 94%. Okay, so we're going to get out of vault mode, and we're going to get back into interview mode. All right, that was pretty seamless. And now my CPU usage is dropping, and so depending on what you use and what configurations you have and how much weight there is on the graphics depends on how much CPU usage you use. Now, if you're at home, right, it may not be that big of a deal. You might have a nice, powerful computer that can handle all that CPU movement, and an NVIDIA computer, right? NVIDIA chip, a graphics card. But if you don't, then you know, if you got like a laptop, you're gonna have to be really conscious of CPU usage. And what you hear is original music created by me over the last, half a millennium, half a century. So this right here is now on a screen share. And last time, when they went live, see it says, please wait, waiting for the webinar to begin. When they went live, that thing popped out.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so did you hear that? So the recording is processed. So I'm going to have to screen share again. All right, so I've got to stop the screen. So now you hear their music. Now I have to screen share to get them back into the groove, and there they are. Join the Zoom rubber now. And then there's a decision, do you add the audio? Do you not add the audio? No, you don't add the audio. So here we are. Chat. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to write in the chat. Hello, this is Liam, and I'm simulcasting you live to LinkedIn. All right, I should really give them my LinkedIn address. Let's see, can I, if I go like this, am I going to destroy the CPU? Try to turn my LinkedIn? Yeah, I'm going to destroy the CPU. All right, forget about it. So, yes, Detransitioners live tonight, weekly webinar. This should be good. The Independent Medical Alliance. All right. Let's see if we can open. I'm going to try to open something here without it. All right, we got it going. And with the Maha Action thing, they flagged me for copyright because I was streaming their intro. So let's see if these guys have an intro. Let's see how good their production is. Is it a glorified Zoom call, or if they're trying to emulate the Maha Action thing? Here we go. Live stream starting soon. So maybe I'll make myself little. How's that? All right. Hello from Chicago. Wellness can be addictive. I like that. Let's give it some applause. Nice. Nice intro.
Well, hello and welcome everyone to the IMA Weekly Show. I'm Dr. Ryan Cole, Head of Medical and Scientific Affairs at the Independent Medical Alliance. Tonight, we're talking about a group of patients who are too often ignored in the public conversation, detransitioners. These are individuals who are told that changing their gender medically or surgically would resolve deep distress, only to later find themselves facing a new set of physical, emotional, and legal challenges, often without acknowledgement and too often without adequate care. This is a difficult subject. It's also an important one because whatever people's politics may be, patients deserve one thing, and that is honesty. They deserve informed consent, and they deserve long-term follow-up, as well as compassionate care when medical interventions do not lead where they are promised. So tonight we're going to take a look at what detransitioners are experiencing, why so many have been overlooked, and what a more responsible, humane, and patient-centered response should look like. I'm joined by an excellent panel tonight. First, we have Dr. Catherine Welch, who is an IMA Senior Fellow in Pediatrics and has been a strong voice for protecting children and restoring medical ethics in this conversation. She's an advisor and on the healthcare team for the Resilience Health Network, where she assists those who have undergone masculinizing or feminizing medical interventions to achieve the best health outcomes possible, whatever they may be. Jennifer Lal is a pediatric critical care nurse and founder of the Center for Bioethics and Culture Network. She's spent years documenting the stories of detransitioners and raising awareness about the long-term consequences many are now facing. And Forrest Smith joins us as a detransitioner who can speak directly to the lived reality behind these debates, what it means to go through this, and what support is still missing. So thank you all for being here. I want to start this at the human level before we get into the policy and medicine. You know, when people hear the word detransitioner, they may think of a political category, but these are real patients, often young patients, who are dealing with consequences that can be lifelong. So let's begin there. Who are these patients? What are they going through? Why has the medical system seemed so reluctant to fully see them? I'll start with you, Dr. Welch. From a pediatric perspective, what concerns you most about the way that children and adolescents have been brought into this medical pathway, often with very limited long-term evidence?
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here on another webinar and with our other guest tonight. I really appreciate IMA for addressing this topic. It's very, very important. And I mean, the thing about detransition is, it's not even a thing. It's not recognized. It's like you type in a Word document, it doesn't recognize the words, not the dictionary, it's not in medical code, not anything. And so I think IMA is not, is addressing other people who are unknown, and so this is another category. But from a pediatric perspective, I think, the problem is that puberty is not a medical diagnosis. It's not a pathology. And unfortunately, gender dysphoria, is so broad and loosely defined is to capture too many people that are just uncomfortable with their bodies. And in this age of everyone online and digital and, and having avatars and things like that, and it's like our bodies are uncomfortable and we don't like it, and we're struggling because of emotions and bodies and changing and commodification and idealizing and all these things. And so a lot of it really has to do with gender dysphoria is kind of like puberty, and we're being told that, well, you can just pause, we're not really sure. It's informed consent does not exist because there's no way. I mean, it's impossible for young people to consent to some of these things, and they're being lied to. And it's also, as been demonstrated by other studies, is that it is a social contagion phenomenon. And so just briefly, we could spend the whole rest of the webinar on that, but I mean, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
So there's gender dysphoria, we're uncomfortable, with how we are, but trans is not a thing. So
Well, and that that kind of brings up the question. So much of what relates to this is anxiety, depression, autism spectrum traits, social isolation. Yet the intervention in our modern era becomes, for some reason, a dominant response or the answer to everything. Oh, something's up, we've got to intervene. So I mean, what do you think about that?
well, it's just over medicalization, over procedures and medicines and medicalization. People will say, like, well, there's follow the money, and there's definitely a lot of money to be made on these procedures, and yet for detransitioners, they're not to be seen, and they're not followed up. And so there is certainly a lot of money, but there's also basically it's robbing, it's societal robbing of its children.
Well, and I like that you bring that
and
up.
child abuse and maltreatment, basically.
I like that you bring that up. It's there's a lot of money, but it ignores the humanity. The money over humanity. So Jennifer, you've spent years listening to stories from detransitioners and helping them document those stories. What patterns have emerged that the broader public still doesn't understand?
When I think about what doesn't the public understand, it's hard for me to think the terms of the public because I've been steeped in this for so long. So of course, I just assume everybody knows what I'm thinking and worrying about and talking about. And as a, an aside, as a pediatric critical care nurse for many, many years, I just want to remind people that, when we used to see young patients with anorexia that were really, really frail because they were on the point of starvation, so we would see them in the hospital, we would not affirm them. We would recognize that they are in distress and we would offer them, the care that they needed to protect them and to get them on a path toward health. I remember one particular young girl in a large children's hospital where I was working with severe anorexia, and we had to have the engineers from the hospital come up and literally turn off all the water in her room and her toilet and her sink because she would use water to drink and vomit and flush things down the toilet. And we didn't put a mirror in her room and say, yes, you are fat, you are disgustingly fat. And so here we have this example where children are told through social media, through algorithms, that they're born in the wrong body. That's one of the big themes. They're born in the wrong body, and that this means that they are the opposite sex and they need to medicalize and change their sex so they can feel good again in their body. This notion of what's called ROGD, rapid onset gender dysphoria, which came about in like the 2010s, kind of when social media and smartphones got into all the hands of adolescents and algorithms were slick and savvy. And if you looked on something that was trans related, you were instantly fed all this. And the large number of comorbidities that these youth have, these young people have. I don't think the larger public realizes that there's so much going on in these young people's lives that allow them to sort of entertain this notion that they're born in the wrong body. And so we're not looking at that. We saw an explosion of this during the COVID lockdowns. Children or young youth were instantly at home, they were locked down, they were on their smartphones, they were on their computers. One gentleman I interviewed for one of the films I made, he literally had to turn off the internet in his home at night. Otherwise, their young son was spending his whole entire night not sleeping, but online chatting and in, all these chat rooms. So I don't think the public really realizes that the trauma, the role that autism plays, these children that are autistic, it's black and white. Oh, I'm born in the wrong body. That must mean I'm the opposite sex. And the role of pornography, along with social media and all the, the TikTok and anime and cosplay is also the rapid rise. Children are getting access to pornography. Chloe Cole, who's a very famous detransitioner in my state, California, I remember speaking to her. She's also in California, and she goes, I saw pornography that no 9-year-olds should ever see, that no adult should ever see. And so how can we affirm that, yes, you're born in the wrong body and ignore the glaring trauma and burden that these children, I say children because I'm old. When I say children, I'm thinking of 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds are children to me too. So I think that's, we've done in medicine in particular, we've done a huge disservice to these young people.
Yeah. It's so many factors, obviously, and a new era with technology. Forrest, you're the human side of this. Take us back to the beginning. How old were you when you started down the path, and what were you told about what transitioning would, do for you? What did you hope your life would look like on the other side of transitioning?
Thank you, Ryan, and Catherine and Jennifer. I should say Jennifer brought up the ROGD, and so I should, I am not part of that cohort of ROGD, and ROGD, my understanding of it is also specifically more with the female cohort. So for me, I see myself as being a little bit more in line with what the traditional cohorts of people who seek out transition are. I went down the medical path at 20.
Okay.
To answer that specific question, but there were some deep-seated psychosexual issues that I was trying to resolve through specifically hormone therapy. So the answer of what did I think I was going to get out of it? I thought that hormone replacement therapy would resolve some of those psychosexual issues that had been setting into place since the onset of puberty. Pornography did play a role. Cross-dressing was part of that. It was a very intense experience. Um, in terms of language, do I mind using the term gender dysphoria to describe what I experienced? That's a whole other discussion, right?
Sure.
But the question of what did I think was going to be on the other side? Well, I wasn't really thinking about that. I
Right.
was 20 years old. It was very emotional. As I said, puberty, there was a lot of sex hormones and lust and desire and all of those sexual issues are wrapped up in it. There was not a lot of long-term thinking. It was very short term. I knew what I wanted, and it was what I had seen online when in 2015, that's when I began my transition. There was actually this wave of two things combining changes in the W path, changes in the DSM-5 that opened it up, and also social media was really kicking off. And so in 2015, I started to see on YouTube men who looked like me. They looked like they were in college, drinking a lot, kind of trying to cover up their depression with alcohol and partying. And they would take feminizing hormones, and then I would watch their transitions, these kind of picture a day transition videos, and they would slowly feminize, and it appeared as though they were becoming more peaceful and serene. And so I wanted that for myself. But ultimately, when I look back on that, it was rather superficial. It was superficial as you could expect from a young mind.
Absolutely. And kind of in follow-up to that, so for, many people may be hearing this for the first time from a detransitioner's perspective, what do you want them to understand or know about how someone gets to that point, and then what it feels like to come out the other side?
I would say about getting to that point that it's different for everybody.
Sure.
The term autogynephilia gets used a lot for talking
Hmm.
about the men. I'll use that term and I'll discuss it. But even when people use that, it's like they feel like they've gone, aha, and they see the one thing underlying it. But the truth is, if you actually look at the work Blanchard did, he was even it was also an umbrella category for more of these subcategories of different
Right.
um, qualities. And you talk about autism. I think that's always been part of this issue with men. But there's still other kind of types that are drawn to this. So I would say it's different for everybody.
Well, and I
Um,
like that you bring that up because it's not any one individual, it's individual. It's not any one broad thing for everybody. That, I mean, that's such an important thing for people to understand. And why, as parents or as people in the community, as friends, as colleagues, et cetera, just recognizing the unique needs of each individual.
and coming out the other side of it, you know, uh, obviously there's grief and loss, and
Sure.
but broadly speaking, I would say there was a great relief to finally see what was underneath that experience. I'm going to use the word autogynephilia again. I think of it almost as a rash. When somebody comes in with a rash, you don't know what exactly is causing that rash. You can see the rash, that's a symptom of something else. Coming out on the other side of it was actually because thankfully I have a family that is functional enough that they can take me back, right? And I can come back into my family and look at the problems with my parents and also look at myself and my family unit within a broader family within the context of cousins and grandparents. And doing that actually was for me, I was able to trace a lot of my own issues back into my parents and my family, and I was able to see an intergenerational issue as well as my own personal issue. And that was a wonderful experience as much as it was a reckoning,
Sure.
right? But also when you have that and you see clearly for the first time enough that you can kind of move ahead and avoid that negative experience and learn your lesson, that's also a very great experience to have.
Well, I love that analogy. It's a rash and it was itching, and then now you were able to cure the rash.
Yes.
A great medical analogy. So, from the medical reality point of view, a lot of the public language around the issue stays at the level of either identity, affirmation, but medicine also has consequences. There's, acts of omission, things we leave out, or things that doctors do commit. And, hormones have consequences, surgeries have consequences. And, those consequences don't disappear when someone changes course. So, Dr. Welsh, back to you. What are some of the physical and developmental risks involved when minors are placed on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or receive surgery?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. There's
I'm sure.
Anywhere. I mean, if you think like your pubertal development, your sex hormones, pretty much every cell in your body is marked with those X and XY chromosomes, and there's different interactions. It's not just about sexual reproductive development, but actually we can talk about that, because what 14-year-old can consent to not having orgasms or children or something like that, right? I mean, there's no concept about family, but then even bone development and strength, especially in women, when you're talking about the social and emotional development. It's just pause. Like, you need these hormones and that pubertal development to develop executive functioning and things like that. So even when they say it's pause, most of these kids are going through transition, because that's the path that they're on. But when we get on the other side of it, and Forrest can tell you, there's very, very permanent, very serious, and like lifelong consequences. Whether you have the women not being able to breastfeed because they've had mastectomy, or what they call top surgery, nice euphemism there, or not really being, or how the disfigurement, the irreversible surgeries, or the irreversible effects of testosterone on a woman's voice, or the effects of estrogen on a man. And we could go on and on about that, but the problem is that there's no informed consent. There's no predict. I mean, you can predict, but this is all experimental to begin with. And the problem is, on the other side, is that now you have thousands and thousands of detransitioners needing medical care. They're not going to go back to the people who mutilated them. I mean, they're furious, they're angry, they don't trust them. The detransitioners coming into our care, they say, we don't want to go to any gender affirming physician. I mean, even if they're good, even if they're considered the best, like, no, if you are lying and doing this to other people, I don't want to see you again. I don't want to see anyone. And they're not following up with those people. And so our network, the Resilience Health Network, is a network of clinicians who are doing medical care where we're trying to provide medical care or provide medical homes or look for medical homes for the detransitioners. The problem is, it was wild West medicine to begin with. It was already experimental. And now we have detransitioners seeking medical care to undo what was experimental. So it's further experimental to say, what are the long-term consequences? What are these consequences of having testosterone as a teenager woman? So, and then doctors don't want to do that, because the good ones are like, well, we don't know what we're doing, and we're uncomfortable, and where's the study, or where's the guidelines? And there aren't any, and the guidelines for transition were made up and false,
Right.
And so there are none for the detrans.
Well,
And so
and I
we can
like-
get into specifics of but undoing it. So that's we're still working on that, and that's part of what the Resilience Health Network is also doing. We're bringing in people who surgeons and endocrinologists, and people who have been working in this field and who can lend some credence, and who are able to support other clinicians who want to help detransitioners.
Well, and I like that Forrest brought up, and you just brought up the same point. It's, you go back to WPATH, and, that's a whole different topic, but they put forward some quote standards, quote guidelines, but they were mostly made up in pseudoscience and no long-term follow-up studies, and it was a very biased organization. Who was it? Schellenberger that did the deep dive into
Yeah,
WPATH?
that's right. Michael Schellenberger, the
Yeah,
WPATH files.
yeah.
And
So
Mia Hughes was the one who took the lead on that.
yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, that again, if you want to do a deep rabbit hole dive on that, that's a fascinating story in and of itself. And I'm glad that Forrest brought that up. Jennifer, from your point of view, what are the medical trends you see? What tends to emerge for these young individuals who are detransitioning the system isn't prepared to handle? I mean, yeah, Dr. Welch just pointed out very well that they're not going to go back to the provider. So what do you see from the medical need point of view in terms of, where can they go or where can they turn?
Yeah. Well, I kind of entered the trans area of medical practice in a roundabout way. I've been spending probably the last 15 years of my professional work in the area of assisted reproductive technologies, fertility and infertility issues. And as a pediatric nurse, I became aware that when they block puberty, and they or they put people on cross-sex hormones to put them on a path, that they're offering these youth fertility preservation. And that's when I said, that's it. That's it. So I cajoled two of my colleagues, Dr. Michael Laidlaw, an endocrinologist, and Angie Thompson, an OBGYN doctor, to co-author a paper with me that ended up in Frontiers in Medicine in the Endocrinology Journal on fertility preservation as a model for dysphoric youth. Even Hilary Cass, Dr. Cass, in her TAS report, recommended that all fertility preservation should be offered to these young people. And it should be standardized how it's offered, because a lot of this care isn't standardized. It's just kind of willy-nilly. And I sort of blew a gasket on the inside and said that, so I ended up at the FTC speaking on a panel there, because the FTC is going after trans medicine in the United States for fraud and abuse. And I think that's the biggest concern that I have, that I hear from young people who have taken cross-sex hormones for many, many years, or just even a few years. Will I be able to get pregnant? And a lot of them regret that they didn't bank and freeze their ovarian testicular tissue and or their eggs or their sperm. And I tell them that that's a fool's errand anyway. The chances of you getting pregnant from freezing and banking your reproductive tissue and freezing it for maybe 15, 20 years, by the time you're old enough to even consider wanting to have children, that you're being offered something which, really rubs me the wrong way as far as informed consent, because a patient should be able to trust if their doctor's offering them something that it's being offered because it's good and helpful and beneficial, not just more of a money grab or false hope. So that's, for me, is very hard. Catherine, Dr. Welch mentioned voice changes. A couple of women have recently come forward. They love to sing. They used to sing. Now they can't sing anymore. That sounds like a minor thing to lose in your life, when you could lose other things maybe other people would see more seriously. But when it's really meaningful and important to you, that's a part of you that it's been taken from you. It's not that you've lost it, it's really been taken from you, from disingenuous practices. The whole lie of all of this is trying to make it so you can pass. You can pass as the opposite sex. And even though you've had all these surgeries, you can't defeminize or demasculinize a lot of these things that have been done to your body. The way they do a mastectomy on a gender dysphoric woman is not the same as a breast cancer patient. I mean, there's shaving of the bone, there's contouring, there's repositioning of the nipples, and they talk about nerve damage. They lose sensation. I mean, our breasts are part of our sexual bodies, and you have no sensation. Prisha Mosley talks about, she recently gave birth as a woman who's had a mastectomy during her trans phase. She has blocked ducts and a lot of pain because milk is being produced in small amounts, but it doesn't have anywhere to go. And so these are real issues that these people face, and I just think it's so sad that at the hands of medicine that this has been done.
Thank you. Yeah, I have so many different areas that we could go, but Forrest, let's go back to you. From your own experience, what did detransitioning mean for you medically? And, what kind of challenges did you face that people obviously don't have this lived experience and may not appreciate? What did it medically look like for you? And how were you able to find a professional to help you detransition?
I would say that I'm fairly lucky in that I had a bilateral orchiectomy, but I did not have a penectomy or a vaginoplasty or a vulvoplasty, in which case my situation would be a lot worse, and I don't know if I would be where I'm at today. Now, what Jennifer brought up is the fertility. That's actually, for me, that's the biggest regret that I live with. Besides having my testicles removed alone, I don't want to make light of the trauma. Just the mere absence is actually a really horrifying. Um, is it a medical issue or a psychological issue? I don't really know. I live with a constant. It's about a 1 or 2 level of pain in
Mm,
the nerves, and it's constantly there. That's something that throughout the day, if I'm working, I can often put that behind me. It's made my sleep a lot worse. Ironically, I kind of, when I was in my transgender identity, my sleep got better because I learned how to meditate and I started doing some more kind of self-care things. But afterwards, with the additional trauma of the amputation of my testicles, I struggle a lot more with insomnia now.
mm.
Um, I've been on testosterone replacement therapy since January of 2021. And Catherine's my doctor, so she has actually seen me come in with low testosterone and not realize that my testosterone level sank. And it's something you don't always notice right away. I think because the nature of it. Hormones are very powerful on the one hand, but they're very subtle.
Absolutely.
Now, recently, this just happened recently, and I upped my dose, and I feel great. I did notice the difference. Um, but I haven't lived with the absence of testosterone since the surgery, and that experience was harrowing. To have a castration level low testosterone. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, I can only
It's
imagine.
abysmal.
I can
It's
only.
an abysmal experience. Just the level of brain fog that I had, and also it changes you so fundamentally. The hormonal change is so fundamental that I remember. I'm afraid I'm slipping into psychological terrain here, but as I began to to retransition with testosterone, it was jarring to think about who am I really? Like, what is my personality? If my personality can be changed. And I think that those are very deep philosophical questions. And there have been times where I've even wondered about if there's ever going to be a day where I'm forced to quit or I do quit. And I hope that if that ever happened, I would be able to kind of um, uh, to hold on to myself despite that.
Hmm.
But the hormonal issue, I now live with, it's been called a medical leash, right? It's something that I have to factor into every life choice.
Sure. Well, and you bring up such a good point. I mean, just for the general audience, and that's that we are hormonal beings. And so for general health, I mean, when mood shifts and body cycle shift and whatnot, and that's an important point for everybody. It's like, hey, what are your hormones doing? And I'm glad that you delved into the psychological aspect of it because that's the human aspect of what you've gone through and so many others that are trying to detransition are going through. There's that grief, the confusion, isolation, betrayal, maybe shame, but it's not simply changing the mind. It's a reckoning, as you've pointed out. And what does that psychological side feel like in the long term? And obviously, you've got a good doctor, and you have some resilience that's admirable amongst anybody going through any medical situation, but especially what you've gone through. So, how do you psychologically rebuild that trust in yourself? What happened or what gave you that sense of rebuilding trust?
Well, I had 2 years of therapy, and that was helpful.
Hmm.
But that was almost the last tier
Sure.
of the family reunion, and faith. I can't separate. I can't really separate any three of those. But faith was a big factor. So, I mean, when I was really stepping into, I called it an era of grace that I had. I felt like I didn't really take credit for my detransition. I really believed that I had been lifted out of it by the Lord.
Beautiful.
But having family there, and as I mentioned earlier, I was looking for me as a man who went through this. I was looking at some intergenerational issues with masculinity
Sure.
it's very much between me and my father and his father,
Hmm.
right? Now, that's not the only man and father figure in my life. In fact, I have three uncles. I have, my dad didn't come with a lot of family, but my mom did. So I remember one day being out on the farm and just looking, I was riding to the orchard with my grandparents, and I was just looking at the back of their heads, and I was looking at my grandfather, so I'm talking about my mother's father, and I just had this very simple kind of childish thought of I came from him. And
Hmm.
just seeing that, like, I'm not just my father's son, I'm my mother's father's grandson, right? So this whole intricate web of relation was really huge. So when I did detransition, I felt like I was stepping back into the world as a son, as a brother, as a nephew, right, as a cousin, as all of these other kind of even the most basic, simple masculine roles of family. I rebuilt myself through that understanding of myself in relation to family, and also work. I went to work, and a lot of the like one of the most superficial things that you don't think of, but a very real thing is when like your wardrobe,
Hmm.
like every think about how many different uh, articles of clothing you have in your wardrobe and you need to function. And so when you've transitioned and made your whole wardrobe that of the opposite sex, that's like this funny level of identity, but it becomes a real barrier.
I
And
bet.
so when I did step back into the world as a man, part of how I ended up rebuilding my wardrobe and my identity was going to work. I went to work in a cannery. It was the cannery where my parents had met, where my family had driven loads of berries. So everything was centered around family, including work. I embraced labor, and then I rebuilt my wardrobe and my identity through work as a man. And at the same time, I did find a psychologist who is simply a forensic psychologist, which was he wasn't a gender specialist. He was a forensic psychologist with a specialty in male sexual offenders.
Hmm.
So I found somebody who basically had seen it all, and I could just be completely honest
Sure.
with, I'm not a serial killer or a dangerous predator. So I could go in there, and he would simply ask me questions, including he asked me three questions. I asked him for some goals, and he asked me three questions. He said, "Who is Forrest? What is stability? What is a healthy relationship?" Because those are the three things that I came in there talking about the most, was being stable and financially independent. He reflected back on me, who are you really? Who is
Hmm.
Forrest? And a healthy relationship. So, I mentioned faith, family, and then that other aspect, therapy was a part of it, but I also journaled by hand, and it was just self, right? It was therapy, and asking those very specific questions to just reflect on, insightfully, of who am I? Because when you go through a transition and you try to change your sex and you adopt an identity of somebody you are not, and of somebody who is the opposite sex, that is a very destabilizing experience.
Certainly.
So there's of course there's a big psychological aspect that to the detransition, that you could say there's a psychological detransition as well. I had to work through a lot of the ideology, and I had to work through a lot of there's a lot of kind of other ideologies that often go with transgender ideology. I think I had to go through all of the whole LGBT list of kind of categories to get down to just who am I?
Sure.
Not any of those identities. Who am I?